So let's look at bringing drivers back to work. And I think, Howard, if I come to you with this one, the lockdown restrictions are starting to be lifted now, it seems, but it's obviously going to be a long and presumably phased approach to that. Drivers who've previously been furloughed are probably going to be quite anxious about their return to work and what to expect. How should employers manage that process?
Well, when the staff come back, they're going to come back to a shrunk environment, as you say, probably at both ends of the spectrum in terms of what goes out the door and what's coming in the way of goods in. So they've got to now be in a situation where the staff need to understand others' duties. If we get a second close down, for example, the staff might now need to be a little bit more versatile. However, the very first thing they need to do is to check that those people are safe enough to come back and do a return to work. You can't expect a lot from someone if they're still not 100% together. So return to work interview or return to work questionnaire, find out how they're feeling, what roles they can take on, what sort of efficiencies can be gained from that person, and utilize them to their best potential would be one way of helping to bridge the gaps where some people have not yet returned, and also to combat where there's been incidents of deaths in the workforce through the coronavirus, where some of the staff will be really upset at the fact they've lost a colleague, and possibly if the person, if they have deceased, is one of the mentors, that's usually quite crushing to the people they've been training, because they haven't had a chance to say goodbye to them. It's not like retirement, you know, they haven't had a chance to say anything to them at all. So there's the delicacies, really, of being able to supply the resources needed to help these people come into work. So first the interview, and then see what's available, see if they can start making the staff versatile, and then build the business up as they can, but they must understand that they shouldn't go pushing these people too hard at the outset straight away.
I mean, Carly, maybe a question for yourself. I mean, as we say, these are, as Howard, you just said, a very challenging times, and returning to work, you know, with the emotional challenges what you just highlighted, but we're also dealing with, at the moment, a significant reduction in road traffic. But what we're reading and what we're potentially going to see is maybe a move away from public transport, and maybe, you know, the traffic level increasing to normal levels, even maybe above that. I mean, the adjustment for everyone, but particularly employees now who are working on the road and driving on the road, how will they adjust to that transition between many weeks and months now, as it's been, to potentially that road traffic issues? Carly, what would you think on that?
I mean, obviously fleets have got a real concern about taking their vehicles out of mothballs, but they need to apply that level of concern and almost process, I suppose, in a way, and rationale to taking their staff out of mothball. And much as we'd advise when you're taking a vehicle out of mothball, you have to go through some vehicle checks and vehicle maintenance. That's why we suggest that obviously with drivers, we need to do some driver checks and some driver maintenance and some refreshing of the driver's knowledge as well, because you've got occupation, we're going to have a nexus of occupational drivers hitting the road who are inexperienced and not having received, in some cases, the training they should have done. We're going to have experienced occupational drivers returning to work after a break, so they're in a bit of a vulnerable state, and the rest of the road is vulnerable to them as drivers. And then we're going to have those commuter drivers, A, coming back to the road as commuter drivers, or B, coming to the road for the very first time as a commuter driver. So we're already starting to see traffic volumes increase, and we're not even out of lockdown, so that's going to cause its issue. Then we've got all of these people who have taken a backward step in many ways with their driving exposure and experience. And then we're going to throw into the mix some occupational drivers and commuter drivers that have never done that before. So I would argue risk is going to increase, sadly, in the public health area of road safety, as we, you know, kind of ease out of the public health crisis of COVID-19, people are also going to be fearful, because I think there was a survey that they said a lot of employees don't want to return to work at all because they're so fearful, or they've enjoyed working at home quite a lot. And that's going to impact how they drive as well. The stress and all of those things will come to bear. So I think as a fleet decision maker, I think a good piece of advice would be to hook up with HR and personnel as well, and take a more holistic approach to, you know, driving management for commuting staff and your occupational drivers, and see what everybody's needs are, where the risk points are, and design a process to manage around that.
I think that's a really good point, Carly, because there's going to be lots of policies and procedures that are going to need permanent changes following everything that's gone on over the last couple of months. I mean, sanitisation for vehicles was one such that we discussed earlier, but there's going to be plenty of others. Howard, one of the key things around that is going to be communicating those policy changes and the need for them to drivers. How do you think employers should go about that?
I'm a strong believer that when you've got times where people have been apart and they're coming back, that you do some sort of welcoming thing to them. You have to keep distances, or if there is an intranet system that the company has that is put on there, and all the things that can possibly be thought of that will change to bring these people back as in a soft way, should be put in a way that is accessible to them. A lot of people like to be in a room with the social distancing and be told what is required, because if a senior manager stands in front of them, they tend to think that they are more cared for. It will help with the productivity and the morale of the staff. They feel more of a unit. And these stuff like you mentioned, sanitisation of vehicles, is an incredibly important thing they've got to do. Could even be communicated to them when they're at home before they come back, in terms of a letter sent to them. Say, when you come back, we will expect this on the first day. Be prepared for this, and give them some sort of opening before they come back to work. Also, when they do come back, there's some people that won't take this on board so well, may have to be put into small groups and shown, because we learn in 3 different ways. With sensory, auditory, and actually doing kinesthetic. And there's normally a crossover between 2 of the 3. And so unless you get to the way that the people understand new information properly, then you're not going to get understanding, and then you won't get people keeping to the routine you want them to do. So putting in small groups with social distancing, put them around a vehicle. So for instance, you use the word sanitisation of a vehicle, get a manager to put them around the vehicle and say, right, you stand 2 meters back that way, you stand 2 meters back, open the front door, say, this is what we mean by sanitising the vehicle. The manager gets in there with all the goods and needs to do it, and shows them all the points that they've got to do, rather than trying to describe what these things are. It's several ways it can be done. It's just got to be tastefully done so that the employer gets to the best method of learning for that employee.
Well, and as you say, instructions from the management is clearly going to help as far as that side is concerned. Carly, you mentioned anxiety and people perhaps not really looking to want to return to work, or if they are clearly working, returning to work, there's going to be a heightened level of anxiety from the adjustments. I mean, the support for companies during this era, because this is an unknown scenario, this extended period of time.
Yeah.
The driver well-being, this is an area I'm sure that you would resonate with, and advice to companies on that.
Yeah, I think it's really important. Howard just said, you know, communication is going to be key. I spent time in the city in a communications role post-terrorist attack in the city of London, and also post the banking crisis. And good communication was the difference between those organisations that survived and thrived and those that really became disjointed. So I think it's obviously there's a job to do in terms of communicating risk and how is that managed, but it's also thinking through to how do we do that with employees that's meaningful to each set of employees. I mean, there's things you can be doing with staff before they return to work. Obviously, if you've got furloughed staff, it's discovering what actually you can do with furloughed employees, but a certain level of of training can take place. Virtual training, and we've all got to grips with the virtual way of running the world now, and video conferencing, etc., could be done. So Howard's suggesting the sanitisation process can be done when they're physically back in the workplace, but certainly training videos could be sent out beforehand. Holding things like this where it's a discursive situation where employees can raise concerns that they've got about their driving and get answers. Organisations like us are very happy to facilitate that and give advice. I'm sure there's other fleet training organisations that will do that as well. But I think people being able to ask questions and get comforting answers is part of keeping them safe, because if they feel looked after, they're going to be safer out there on the road as well.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a key point going forward. Fleets are really going to have to take account of the well-being of all of their drivers as we move forward through and out of the COVID-19 situation. So Carly, Howard, Peter, thank you very much for yet another insightful discussion, and we'll see you on the next video. Thank you.